The air in our home, usually a symphony of comforting, familiar notes, the faint, warm vanilla of Clara's lotion, the crisp linen scent of our freshly laundered curtains, the earthy musk of the aged oak furniture, had begun to carry a discordant element. It was a whisper at first, a delicate, almost imperceptible floral sweetness that didn't belong. I, Elias, a man whose life was intricately woven with the nuances of scent, noticed it immediately. My profession, that of a creator of bespoke fragrances, had gifted me with a hyper-awareness of olfactory details. It was both a blessing and, I was beginning to suspect, a curse. Clara, my wife of 7 years, had always been a creature of consistent habits. Her perfumes, a carefully curated collection of classic florals and subtle musks, were as much a part of her as her gentle smile and graceful movements. But this new, almost cloying sweetness was foreign, a jarring note in the otherwise harmonious melody of our shared existence. I dismissed it initially, attributing it to a new hand cream or a gift from a well-meaning friend. Yet, the scent persisted, a persistent, unsettling undercurrent that gnawed at my peace of mind. One evening, while Clara attended what she described as a mandatory late meeting with her colleagues, I found myself drawn to our bedroom. The air within was thick with the unfamiliar floral note, now more pronounced, more insistent. It mingled with the lingering warmth of her presence, creating a strange, almost suffocating atmosphere. My gaze drifted to the dresser, where a small porcelain dish held her collection of jewelry. Nestled amongst the gleaming necklaces and delicate earrings was a single, misplaced object, a tie. It was a silk tie, a deep, rich burgundy, a shade I knew I didn't own. The fabric felt foreign to my touch, smooth and cool, and it carried a faint, musky undertone that was both unfamiliar and strangely repulsive. A coldness spread through me, a chilling sensation that settled in the pit of my stomach. It was as if a delicate porcelain vase, representing the fragile beauty of our marriage, had been shattered, leaving behind a sharp, jagged shard of suspicion. I carefully picked up the tie, bringing it closer to my nose. The musky scent, combined with the lingering floral sweetness, formed a distinct, almost tangible presence. It was the scent of another person, an intruder in our sanctuary. I placed the tie back in the dish, my hands trembling slightly. The floral sweetness, once a mere curiosity, now felt like a suffocating shroud, a symbol of something hidden, something betrayed. The familiar comfort of our bedroom had vanished, replaced by an unsettling unease. I felt like a stranger in my own home, adrift in a sea of unspoken questions and growing dread. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake, Clara's even breaths a counterpoint to the turmoil in my mind. The floral sweetness seemed to have intensified, clinging to the sheets, the curtains, even the air itself. It was as if an invisible presence had taken up residence in our home, a phantom that mocked me with its silent, fragrant taunts. I rose before dawn, unable to bear the suffocating atmosphere of our bedroom. The house was silent, the only sound the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I wandered through the rooms, each one imbued with the lingering scent of Clara and the unknown intruder. It was in the living room, where we often spent evenings together, that I found another clue. A single long strand of hair, a shade of auburn that was definitely not Clara's, lay on the arm of the sofa. It was a subtle thing, easily overlooked, but to my heightened senses, it was a beacon, a confirmation of my growing suspicions. I picked up the hair, holding it between my fingers. It was soft, almost silky, and it carried the same musky undertone as the tie. The scent was faint, but unmistakable. It was the scent of a man who had been in my home, in my living room with my wife. The realization sent a wave of nausea through me, a visceral reaction to the violation of our sanctuary. I spent the day in a daze, going through the motions of my work, but my mind was elsewhere. The floral sweetness and the musky undertone followed me everywhere, a constant reminder of the betrayal. I tried to focus on my creations, on the delicate balance of scents that had always brought me solace, but my inspiration was gone. All I could smell was the phantom scent of the intruder, a haunting presence that refused to be ignored. As evening approached, I found myself drawn back to the living room. I sat on the sofa, the cushion still bearing the faint impression of Clara's body. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, trying to decipher the phantom scent. It was a complex aroma, a blend of musk and spice, with a hint of something sharp, almost metallic. It was a scent that spoke of confidence, of arrogance, of a man who was used to getting what he wanted. I opened my eyes, a new resolve hardening within me. I would not be a passive victim in this fragrant betrayal. I would use my gift, my knowledge of scents, to uncover the truth and to exact my revenge. The phantom scent would lead me to the intruder, and then I would make him pay. The phantom scent became my obsession. I carried it with me, a constant, invisible companion. I analyzed it, dissected it, memorized its every nuance. It was a complex scent, a tapestry woven with threads of musk, spice, and a subtle metallic tang. It was a scent that spoke of power, of ambition, and of a dangerous undercurrent of ruthlessness. I began to frequent the places Clara frequented, the upscale cafes, the trendy restaurants, the art galleries she loved to visit. I would sit unobtrusively in a corner, my senses on high alert, searching for the phantom scent. I would scan the faces, the clothes, the gestures, looking for any sign, any clue that would lead me to the intruder. Days turned into weeks, and still, the phantom scent remained elusive. I was beginning to lose hope, to doubt my own senses. Perhaps I was mistaken, I thought. Perhaps the scent was just a figment of my imagination, a manifestation of my growing paranoia. Then, one rainy afternoon, as I was walking aimlessly through the city center, I caught a whiff of it. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, unmistakable. I followed the scent, my heart pounding in my chest, until I reached a small, unassuming bookstore tucked away on a quiet side street. I hesitated at the entrance, my senses overwhelmed by the sudden surge of the phantom scent. It was stronger now, more pronounced, mingled with the scent of old paper and leather. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The bookstore was dimly lit, the shelves lined with books that reached the ceiling. A few customers browsed quietly, their faces hidden behind open pages. I scanned the room, my gaze drawn to a figure seated at a small table in the back. It was a man, his back to me, his head bent over a book. He was wearing a dark suit, his hair neatly combed, his posture exuding an air of quiet confidence. I couldn't see his face, but I didn't need to. The phantom scent was emanating from him, a powerful, intoxicating aroma that filled the air around him. I approached the table, my steps slow and deliberate. As I drew closer, I saw that the man was reading a book of poetry, his lips moving silently as he traced the lines with his finger. I recognized the book. It was Clara's favorite. I stood behind him, my shadow falling across the page. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. And in that instant I knew. It was Mark. Mark, our friend, our confidant, the man we had welcomed into our home, into our lives. Mark, with his easy charm, his quick wit, his disarming smile. Mark, who had betrayed my trust, who had violated my sanctuary, who had stolen my wife. The phantom scent, once a mystery, now had a name, a face, a history. It was the scent of betrayal, the scent of deceit, the scent of Mark. A surge of anger, hot and consuming, threatened to overwhelm me. I wanted to lash out, to confront him, to demand answers. But I held back. This was not the time for impulsive actions. My revenge, when it came, would be far more subtle, far more devastating. It would be a masterpiece of manipulation, a symphony of scents designed to unravel their lives, to expose their deceit, and to leave them drowning in the consequences of their betrayal. I left the bookstore, the image of Mark, engrossed in Clara's favorite poetry, burned into my mind. The rain had stopped, and the city air was fresh and clean, but all I could smell was the cloying scent of betrayal. It clung to me like a shroud, a constant reminder of the violation I had suffered. I walked for hours, my mind racing, my thoughts a whirlwind of anger, hurt, and a growing sense of purpose. I would not be a victim. I would not wallow in self-pity. I would use my gift, my knowledge of sense, to craft a revenge that would be as exquisite as it was devastating. I returned home late that night, the house dark and silent. Clara was asleep, her face pale and serene in the moonlight. I stood by the bed, watching her, a complex mix of emotions swirling within me. Love, anger, betrayal, and a deep, abiding sense of loss. I went to my studio, a small, secluded room at the back of the house. It was my sanctuary, my laboratory, my refuge from the world. The air was thick with the scents of my creations, a symphony of floral, woody, and spicy notes. I lit a candle, the soft glow illuminating the shelves lined with bottles, vials, and beakers. I began to work, my hands moving with a practiced ease. I selected my ingredients carefully, each one chosen for its specific properties, its ability to evoke emotions, to manipulate perceptions, to alter reality. I was an alchemist, and my retort was the human mind. I worked through the night, the silence broken only by the clinking of glass and the soft whisper of the flame. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky, I had created my first weapon. It was a scent, a subtle blend of seemingly innocuous notes, designed to unsettle, to disorient, to plant the seeds of doubt and fear. I called it Comfort's Decay. My first target was Mark. I needed to isolate him, to weaken him, to make him vulnerable to the full force of my fragrant vengeance. Comfort's Decay was designed to subtly undermine his sense of well-being, to introduce a discordant note into the symphony of his life. It was a masterpiece of subtlety. The base was a familiar, comforting scent, a blend of freshly cut grass and warm vanilla, reminiscent of childhood summers and carefree days. But layered over this was a series of carefully chosen notes designed to create a creeping sense of unease. A hint of mildew, a touch of decaying leaves, a subtle metallic tang that lingered in the back of the throat. These notes were barely perceptible, yet their effect was profound. I began by introducing Comfort's Decay into Mark's workplace. He was a high-powered lawyer, his office a sleek, modern space in a prestigious downtown building. I gained access under the guise of a client, my true purpose masked by a carefully constructed facade. I sprayed a diluted version of the scent in the ventilation system, ensuring that it would permeate the entire floor. The effect was gradual, insidious. First, Mark noticed nothing. But over time, a subtle discomfort began to creep into his consciousness. The familiar scent of his expensive leather chair now carried a faint, musty undertone. The crisp, clean air of his office seemed to be tinged with a metallic tang. He found himself becoming increasingly irritable, his concentration wavering, his usual confidence replaced by a nagging sense of unease. He attributed it to stress, to overwork, to the pressures of his demanding job. But the discomfort persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. He started to experience headaches. His sleep became disturbed by strange, unsettling dreams. The world around him, once so familiar and predictable, now seemed to be subtly shifting, tilting on its axis. He began to doubt himself, his decisions, his perceptions. The confidence that had always been his hallmark began to crumble, replaced by a growing sense of insecurity. He was losing control and he didn't know why. I watched his descent from afar, a grim satisfaction growing within me. Comfort's Decay was working its magic, slowly but surely unraveling the fabric of his life. He was becoming a prisoner of his own senses, trapped in a world of subtle discomfort and creeping paranoia. The first act of my fragrant revenge was underway. With Mark subtly succumbing to the insidious effects of Comfort's Decay, I turned my attention to Clara. For her, I crafted a scent that was both beautiful and cruel, a fragrant reflection of her own betrayal. I called it Floral Deceit. Clara, as I mentioned, adored flowers. Her favorite was the lily, its intoxicating fragrance a constant presence in our home. Floral Deceit was built around this love, a complex bouquet of lilies, roses, and jasmine, designed to initially enchant and then subtly repel. The deception lay in the undertones. I introduced notes of decay, of overripe fruit, of stagnant water. These notes were carefully calibrated, almost imperceptible at first, but their effect was cumulative, creating a subtle dissonance that would slowly erode the beauty of the floral bouquet. I began by gifting Clara a bottle of floral deceit, disguised as a new perfume from a prestigious Parisian boutique. She was delighted, her eyes sparkling with pleasure as she inhaled the intoxicating fragrance. She wore it constantly, unaware of the insidious poison it contained. The initial effect was, as intended, positive. People complimented her on her perfume, remarking on its unique and captivating scent. But as the days passed, a subtle shift occurred. The compliments became less frequent, replaced by hesitant glances and subtle gestures of avoidance. Clara, oblivious to the source of the change, attributed it to stress or fatigue. But the truth was far more sinister. The undertones of decay in floral deceit were beginning to take hold, creating a subtle but pervasive aura of repulsion. People instinctively recoiled from her, their senses registering a dissonance they couldn't quite explain. Her colleagues started to avoid her, their meetings becoming brief and impersonal. Her friends, once eager to spend time with her, now found excuses to cancel their plans. Even strangers on the street seemed to give her a wider berth than usual. Clara, once the center of attention, was slowly becoming an outcast, isolated by a scent she couldn't perceive, a victim of her own fragrant deception. The vibrant bloom of her social life was beginning to wilt, poisoned by the subtle decay woven into her favorite perfume. My revenge was taking root, its tendrils slowly but surely strangling her happiness, her confidence, her sense of belonging. I decided to orchestrate a more direct confrontation with the consequences of their betrayal. An opportunity presented itself in the form of a dinner party we were hosting. It was an annual tradition, a gathering of close friends and colleagues, a celebration of our seemingly perfect life. This year, however, it would serve a different purpose. I meticulously planned the evening, every detail carefully considered. The menu, the music, the lighting, all were designed to create an atmosphere of subtle tension and unease. And, of course, the scents. For the dining room, I created a bespoke fragrance, the unveiling. It was a complex blend, designed to heighten emotions, to amplify anxieties, to bring hidden tensions to the surface. The base was a warm, inviting scent of roasted spices and wood smoke, reminiscent of cozy winter evenings. But layered over this were subtle notes of discord, a hint of bitterness, a touch of metallic sharpness, a faint, almost imperceptible undercurrent of decay. As the guests arrived, they were greeted by the intoxicating aroma of the unveiling. They complimented me on the scent, unaware of its insidious purpose. Clara, radiant in a new dress, her hair adorned with lilies, seemed oblivious to the tension that crackled in the air. Mark, however, seemed ill at ease. His eyes darted nervously around the room, his smile strained, his usual confidence replaced by a palpable anxiety. The dinner proceeded, the conversation flowing with forced gaiety. But beneath the surface, the tension simmered. The guests, influenced by the unveiling, became more sensitive to each other's moods, their anxieties amplified, their hidden resentments bubbling to the surface. Clara, bathed in the decaying sweetness of floral deceit, found herself increasingly isolated. Her attempts at conversation were met with polite but distant responses. Her jokes fell flat, her stories met with forced smiles. She felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling of being excluded, of being judged. Mark, meanwhile, was struggling to maintain his composure. The subtle discomfort of comfort's decay had intensified, his senses bombarded by phantom smells and unsettling sensations. He felt a growing sense of paranoia, convinced that the other guests were whispering about him, judging him, mocking him. The evening culminated in a dramatic confrontation. Fueled by the heightened emotions and amplified anxieties, a trivial disagreement between two of the guests escalated into a full-blown argument. Accusations were hurled, secrets revealed, long-held grudges brought to light. The carefully constructed facade of our perfect life shattered into 1,000 pieces. Clara and Mark, exposed and vulnerable, became the focus of the guests' scrutiny. Their affair, hinted at in whispers and veiled accusations, became the elephant in the room, the unspoken truth that poisoned the atmosphere. The dinner party, intended as a celebration, became a public spectacle of their betrayal, a fragrantly orchestrated humiliation that left them both reeling. The aftermath of the dinner party was swift and brutal. Our friends, once so close, distanced themselves, their loyalty shattered by the revelation of Clara's infidelity. The invitations stopped, the phone calls dwindled. The once vibrant social life we had enjoyed evaporated into thin air. Clara, ostracized and alone, retreated into herself. The decaying sweetness of floral deceit clung to her like a shroud, a constant reminder of her betrayal and its consequences. She tried to understand what had gone wrong, but her attempts at introspection were met with a wall of denial and self-deception. She blamed Mark, accusing him of ruining her life, of seducing her with his charm, and then abandoning her to face the consequences alone. She railed against the injustice of it all, lamenting the loss of her friends, her social status, her carefully constructed image of perfection. But deep down, a gnawing sense of guilt began to erode her defenses. The scent of floral deceit, once a source of pleasure, now filled her with a sense of revulsion. It was a constant reminder of her own duplicity, of the lies she had told, the trust she had betrayed. She tried to escape the scent, scrubbing herself raw in the shower, changing her clothes multiple times a day, even resorting to burning incense and spraying air freshener. But it was no use. The scent clung to her, permeating her skin, her hair, her clothes, her very being. She became a prisoner in her own home, the walls closing in on her, the silence deafening. The phantom scent of Mark, the musky undertone that had once excited her, now filled her with dread. She saw him everywhere, in the shadows, in the reflections, in the whispers of the wind. Her world, once so bright and vibrant, had become a dark and suffocating isolation chamber, a fragrant prison of her own making. The scent of floral deceit, a constant reminder of her betrayal, was slowly driving her mad. While Clara was withering under the weight of social isolation and self-reproach, Mark's descent was far more dramatic, a terrifying plunge into the depths of paranoia and delusion. Comfort's decay had taken root in his psyche, twisting his perceptions, warping his reality. The subtle discomfort he had initially experienced had escalated into a full-blown sensory assault. The phantom smells, once fleeting and elusive, now bombarded him constantly. The metallic tang was everywhere, in the food he ate, the water he drank, the air he breathed. The scent of decay clung to him, emanating from his own skin, his clothes, his very breath. He became convinced that he was being poisoned, that someone was deliberately trying to harm him. He saw conspiracies everywhere, in the news reports, in the conversations of strangers, in the seemingly innocuous events of his daily life. He started to see things, shadowy figures lurking in the corners of his vision, faces peering at him from the windows of passing cars. He heard voices, whispering his name, taunting him with threats and accusations. His behavior became increasingly erratic. He lost his job, his colleagues unable to tolerate his unpredictable mood swings and paranoid outbursts. He alienated his friends, his constant suspicions and accusations driving them away. He retreated into his apartment, transforming it into a fortress against the imagined threats that surrounded him. He boarded up the windows, covered the mirrors, slept with a knife under his pillow. He spent his days obsessively cleaning, scrubbing every surface, trying to eradicate the phantom smells that tormented him. But it was no use. The scent of Comfort's decay had become a part of him, an invisible parasite that fed on his sanity. He was trapped in a nightmare of his own making, a fragrant hell where reality and delusion blurred, where fear and paranoia reigned supreme. The scent of decay, once a subtle discomfort, had become the soundtrack to his descent into madness. My revenge was reaching its crescendo. Clara, isolated and ostracized, was a shadow of her former self. Mark, consumed by paranoia and delusion, was teetering on the brink of madness. But I wasn't finished yet. I wanted their suffering to be public, their humiliation complete. An opportunity presented itself in the form of a charity gala Clara was hosting. It was a high-profile event, attended by the city's elite, a perfect stage for the final act of my fragrant revenge. I infiltrated the venue the day before the event, posing as a member of the catering staff. I gained access to the air conditioning system and introduced a concentrated dose of floral deceit into the ventilation ducts. The scent, amplified by the air circulation, would permeate the entire ballroom, creating an inescapable atmosphere of subtle revulsion. The night of the gala arrived, and Clara, dressed in a stunning gown, her face carefully painted with a mask of composure, greeted her guests with a forced smile. She was unaware of the fragrant trap I had set, the invisible net that would soon ensnare her. As the guests mingled, the scent of floral deceit began to spread, its decaying sweetness subtly permeating the air. At first, it was barely noticeable, a faint dissonance that registered only in the subconscious. But as the evening progressed, the scent intensified, its cloying sweetness becoming increasingly oppressive. The guests, initially charmed by Clara's graciousness, began to feel a growing sense of unease. They subtly recoiled from her, their senses registering a dissonance they couldn't quite explain. The compliments on her appearance became less frequent, replaced by hesitant glances and veiled whispers. Clara, oblivious to the source of the change, attributed it to the stress of hosting such a high-profile event. But the truth was far more sinister. The scent of floral deceit, amplified by the air conditioning system, was turning her into a pariah, an object of subtle revulsion. The gala, intended as a showcase of her social standing, became a public spectacle of her humiliation. The guests, their senses assaulted by the decaying sweetness of her perfume, discreetly fanned themselves, whispering about a strange, unpleasant odor. Clara, once the belle of the ball, was now the source of its discomfort, a fragrant outcast in the midst of her own carefully orchestrated event. The humiliation was complete, her public image tarnished, her social standing irrevocably damaged. Mark, already teetering on the precipice of madness, was ill-equipped to handle the news of Clara's public humiliation. The scent of comfort's decay, now a constant presence in his life, amplified his paranoia, twisting the news into a confirmation of his worst fears. He saw the gala incident as a deliberate attack, a public condemnation orchestrated by his enemies. He imagined shadowy figures whispering in the corridors of power, plotting his downfall, manipulating events to destroy him. He became increasingly reclusive, refusing to leave his apartment, his phone ringing unanswered, his emails piling up unread. He spent his days pacing the floor, his mind racing, his senses bombarded by phantom smells and unsettling sounds. The scent of decay, once confined to his immediate surroundings, now seemed to permeate the entire building. He imagined it seeping through the walls, rising from the floorboards, dripping from the ceiling. He felt it clinging to him, suffocating him, poisoning him from the inside out. He tried to fight back to reclaim his sanity. He consulted doctors, therapists, even spiritual healers. But nothing worked. The scent of comfort's decay had taken root deep within his psyche. Its tendrils wrapped around his mind, strangling his reason. He became a prisoner in his own apartment, the walls closing in on him, the silence pressing down on him with the weight of 1,000 unspoken accusations. The world outside, once so familiar and inviting, now seemed like a hostile and threatening place. He was trapped in a fragrant hell of his own making, a solitary confinement where the only company was the scent of decay and the whispers of his own paranoia. The once successful lawyer, the confident and charismatic man, was now a broken shell, a victim of his own tormented mind. While Mark was succumbing to the suffocating grip of comfort's decay, Clara was experiencing a different kind of torment. The public humiliation at the gala had shattered her carefully constructed facade, exposing the fragility of her social standing and the emptiness of her life. The scent of floral deceit, once a symbol of her beauty and desirability, now filled her with a profound sense of shame. It was a constant reminder of her betrayal, her deceit, her fall from grace. She spent her days wandering aimlessly through the empty rooms of our house, the silence amplifying the echoes of her past. The familiar sense of our life together, once a source of comfort, now mocked her with their lost innocence. She tried to reach out to Mark, seeking solace in their shared transgression. But he was unreachable, lost in his own private hell of paranoia and delusion. His phone went unanswered. His apartment door remained firmly closed. Alone and abandoned, Clara began to confront the consequences of her actions. The friends she had betrayed, the trust she had broken, the life she had thrown away, all came back to haunt her, their ghostly presence amplified by the ever-present scent of floral deceit. She started to experience vivid flashbacks, reliving the moments of her affair with Mark, the stolen kisses, the whispered promises, the illicit thrill of their forbidden encounters. But now, these memories were tinged with regret, with a growing awareness of the damage she had caused. The scent of floral deceit, once a source of excitement and pleasure, now evoked a profound sense of sadness, a longing for the life she had lost, the innocence she had squandered. It was a constant reminder of her own culpability, a fragrant echo of her shattered dreams. She was trapped in a cycle of regret and remorse, her past mistakes haunting her present, the scent of floral deceit, a constant reminder of her fall from grace. I knew the end was near. Clara and Mark were both broken, their lives shattered by the consequences of their actions and the subtle manipulations of my fragrant revenge. But I wanted one final act, a culminating moment that would force them to confront the full extent of their betrayal and the devastating impact it had had on their lives. I created a final scent, a potent and devastating blend I called the Mirror's Truth. It was a complex and unsettling aroma, designed to amplify the wearer's deepest fears, regrets, and insecurities. The base was a cold, metallic scent, reminiscent of blood and steel, overlaid with notes of decay, of mildew, of the lingering scent of a funeral pyre. But the key ingredient was a rare and volatile compound that had the power to unlock hidden emotions, to bring suppressed anxieties to the surface, to force the wearer to confront the truth about themselves. I released the Mirror's Truth into the air, a silent, invisible wave that washed over Clara and Mark, engulfing them in its potent embrace. For Clara, the effect was immediate and devastating. The scent amplified her feelings of guilt and remorse, forcing her to confront the full extent of her betrayal. She saw herself as others saw her, a deceitful wife, a disloyal friend, a fallen woman. The scent of floral deceit, once a symbol of her beauty, now became a mirror reflecting her inner ugliness. She was consumed by regret, haunted by the memory of the life she had destroyed. For Mark, the Mirror's Truth shattered the fragile walls of his paranoia, forcing him to confront the reality of his situation. He saw himself as a coward, a weakling, a man who had allowed his desires to consume him. The scent of comfort's decay, once a source of unease, now became a symbol of his own moral decay. He was consumed by shame, haunted by the knowledge of the pain he had inflicted. Consumed by their amplified fears and regrets, Clara and Mark were left shells of their former selves. Their world, once filled with the promise of illicit pleasure, was now a fragrant ruin, a testament to my cruel, artistic revenge. Clara, haunted by the ghosts of her past, withdrew completely from society. She sold our house, seeking refuge in a remote cottage by the sea, where she lived a solitary existence, her days filled with regret and remorse. The scent of floral deceit lingered in her memory, a constant reminder of her shattered dreams. Mark, his sanity irrevocably broken, was committed to a mental institution, where he spent his days lost in a world of his own making, his senses forever tormented by the phantom smells of comfort's decay. The once confident lawyer was now a broken man, a victim of his own tormented mind. I watched their descent from afar, a grim satisfaction mingled with a profound sense of emptiness. My revenge was complete, but the victory felt hollow. I had destroyed their lives, but in doing so, I had also destroyed a part of myself. The sense I had created, once instruments of vengeance, now filled me with a sense of unease. Floral deceit, comfort's decay, the mirror's truth. They were all reminders of the darkness that lay within me, the capacity for cruelty that I had unleashed. I returned to my studio, the sanctuary where I had crafted my fragrant revenge. But the air was no longer filled with the comforting sense of my creations. It was heavy with the scent of regret, the lingering aroma of my own moral decay. I put away my bottles, my vials, my beakers. I closed the door to my studio, leaving behind the tools of my fragrant vengeance. I would never create another scent again. The artist was silent, his palette forever stained with the colors of betrayal and revenge. Their world, once filled with the promise of illicit pleasure, was now a fragrant ruin, a testament to Elias's cruel, artistic revenge. They were trapped in a cage of scent, a constant, inescapable reminder of their betrayal and the art of a man they wronged.